Hey everyone, we're doing the urinary system today, our first module in module 5. So let's get down to our question of the day. How can you help pass a kidney stone? An interesting answer that we come up with here. So let's go over the pre-lecture assignment together, just to make sure we know the organs of the urinary system. Starting with the kidneys, and that's what we're going to focus on the most today, is the kidneys and what they do. A pair of organs that filter blood and make urine. The ureters conduct urine from the kidneys to the bladder, and they have smooth muscle contractions that help to move it there. So here, this whole thing that we're looking at is the kidney, and this here is the ureter, which is going to essentially dump all of that urine to the bladder, which is not pictured here. Next step, the urinary bladder. Stores urine until it is expelled from the body until you urinate. Layers of muscles help with expansion, and it contains 2 sphincters to help hold the urine until you're ready to get it out. The urethra RA, is the small tube that extends from the bladder to remove urine from the body. So we already labeled the ureter. Let's label the rest of this. We've got the renal cortex, which is all this here on the outside. Contains all the vessels. We've got the renal medulla. And then you have the renal artery. That's where the kidney receives blood, and then the renal vein is where it will send it out. And this right here, we'll refer to this later, is the renal pelvis. Pretty simple pre-lab today. Pre-lecture, sorry. I'm used to saying pre-lab. Okay, let's look at the kidneys. So blood flow into and out of the kidney. Like we mentioned before, blood is going to enter at the renal artery. And after it does all its stuff here, it's going to leave at the renal vein. Okay, next we need to talk about nephrons. Those are located in the renal cortex. You can see them here. And if we zoom in a little bit more, these are the nephrons that you're looking at. These whole structures right here. So they're located in the renal cortex and extend into the renal medulla. You can see them extending down there. And they filter the blood and produce urine. And they're made of vascular and tubular components. So we're going to go over those parts. So vascular And we've heard these words before as afferent and efferent. And again, I think it's actually pronounced afferent and efferent, but that's hard to hear the difference when you're saying it, so I call it afferent. So afferent, when you see the A, just think arriving. And with efferent down here, when you see the E, just think exiting. And so hopefully that will help you keep those two straight. So back up here to the afferent arteriole, this supplies blood from the renal artery to the glomerulus. So remember, arteries always lead to arterioles. So we've got the renal artery bringing blood in, and here's the afferent arteriole. So takes blood from the renal artery to the structure here called the glomerulus. So let's talk about what that is. It's a knot of capillaries. I think of like a ball of yarn in there, just all wound up. And this is where blood plasma is filtered. Again, blood arrives, it enters via the afferent arteriole, comes into the glomerulus, and exits via the efferent arteriole. So the efferent arteriole carries blood leaving the glomerulus. That's always a hard word for me to say, so sorry if I mess it up. So afferent, glomerulus, ball of capillaries, efferent arteriole, and then the rest of this is the peritubular capillary network. So these are capillaries that wind around the tubular components for additional exchange, and it empties into the renal vein. So all of that is going on here inside one of the nephrons. In this picture, the vascular components are the red and blue and purplish through here, and the tubular components that we'll talk about next are the tan or yellow parts. So for the tubular components, you have the glomerular capsule, also known as Bowman's capsule, that surrounds the glomerulus here. So in this picture, it's kind of been cut away, but imagine that this tubular, can't help but think of Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. You guys might be too young, but if you know, you know. Totally tubular. This tubular component would cover this as well. So it's kind of like the glomerulus is inside Bowman's capsule like that. So this receives filtered blood from the glomerulus, and then that moves into the proximal convoluted tubule. So proximal, to help you remember that, just think in close proximity. Proximal means closer to, so that's the first part of the closest part of the convoluted tubule that is closest to the glomerulus. And this has a brush border for increased surface area. So the last time we talked about a brush border was in the digestive system in the small intestine. So we could have increased surface area for absorption of nutrients, and we want the same thing here because we're going to be doing a lot of exchange of materials at this part. So whereas in the digestive system we called it absorption, here we call it reabsorption. Next up, so we got the proximal convoluted tubule, and then we go down into the loop of Henle. They're calling it the loop of the nephron, but in physiology and anatomy, I believe they call it the loop of Henle. And this is where most of the urine is concentrated. And then we have the distal convoluted tubule. Distal is further from, so think of distal is distant. And this is where most of the ion exchange occurs. And this will lead to the collecting duct, which ultimately takes us to the renal pelvis. Let's get our picture back. The renal pelvis is here, so it's kind of dumping everything here into the renal pelvis, which will lead to the ureter and eventually to the bladder, so it can be expelled. So, disorders of the urinary system. Good old UTIs, urinary tract infection. These are most common in the bladder and the urethra, and it's usually caused by E. coli entering the urinary tract. E. coli is a type of bacteria. So UTIs can happen anywhere in the urinary tract, all the way up to the kidneys, and that's when it gets really serious, as if it reaches the kidneys. But typically, it stays in the bladder or the urethra. So if you know, you know. Again, these are common. It causes a burning sensation during urination, cloudy urine, and frequent urgency to urinate. I'm an open book here. I've had a UTI before, and this was the worst part. And I worked through it, and I felt like I had to go to the bathroom every literally minute, and it it was awful. Let's just say that. Anyways, they're most common in women. And the reason for that is because women have shorter urethras than men. Um, so it's a shorter distance for bacteria to get in. So women have, I forget the measurement, small urethras. I made the mistake about 10 years ago, the first time I was teaching physiology, and I was like, yeah, because women have short urethras like this, and then men have urethras that are like maybe like this, and all the class, the guys' faces were like, uh. Okay, I'm sorry. Focus. Okay, so anyway, it's going to be easier for bacteria to travel that short distance than all the way up through the penis to the bladder. And just get used to it because I looked at our reproductive system notes and we're going to get into it. So, yeah. Kidney stones. These are granules made of calcium, phosphate, uric acid, and protein. I have never had a kidney stone, I will say that. But I know people that have, and apparently it's pretty bad. So if it gets large, it can block the renal pelvis or ureter. And if that gets blocked, it can cause backflow into nephrons. I can't, my handwriting goes crooked. I should just have it sideways how I write. Causing damage. But in each kidney, you have approximately 1 million nephrons. So if you damage a few, it's going to be okay. And these kidney stones can pass on their own. Sometimes they use shock waves to break them up, or an incision can break up or remove it. But I believe that's going to lead us to the question of the day. Yes. How can you help pass a kidney stone? And don't sign me up for this, but Michigan State did a study where they took people with kidney stones and put them on a rickety old rattly roller coaster. And it had, from going on that roller coaster, 70% of them passed the kidney stones, just from all the jarring and shaking around. So I hate roller coasters, but first of all, while being in pain from a kidney stone and then put me on a rickety roller coaster, I don't know, maybe you'll do anything to get out of the pain, but it doesn't sound fun to me. So the answer is riding an old, rattly, that's not a real word, rattly roller coaster. So think if you've been to Lagoon, that stupid old white roller coaster, that's the kind we're talking about. That's going to just jar and shake your whole body up. The coasters that have quick turns, or the newer ones, or inversions, or big drops, that's not going to do the trick. You got to have those really shaky ones. So yeah, 70% pass rate on those. So get on an old rattly roller coaster, head up to Lagoon. Okay, more disorders of the urinary system. We have hemodialysis. So this is for kidney failure patients where their kidneys aren't doing their job, but we still have to get the blood filtered. So they have a machine that does it. So this is going to filter the blood outside of the body. And I don't know a lot about this, or I don't know anyone that personally has had to do this, but I know that it takes hours and hours per week. You have to go a certain number of days a week. I don't know if it's every day. I think it takes at least a few hours each time. So this is a very long process because normally your kidneys are just doing this all day long and it has to be filtered or you will die. So the way that it works is blood passes through a membranous tube that is bathed in dialysis fluid. So a membranous tube is something that lets certain things pass through it. And wastes in the blood are simply diffusing from high concentration to low. And so you want the dialysis fluid to have a lower concentration gradient of the stuff that you want to filter out of the blood, so it will move from high to low. So you have two IVs here, one where the blood comes out and is sent into the machine where it's cleaned and filtered, and the waste will come out here, and then the clean blood is returned to the body. And then you have, I don't know how to say this word, the dialysis fluid coming in here. So just know that the way that this works is simple diffusion from high to low concentration, from in the blood to out into that dialysis fluid. Pretty cool that we figured out how to do that. Hopefully there's a better, faster way someday, but that's what we got for now. So urine formation, there are 3 stages that we'll go over. There's glomerular filtration and tubular reabsorption, and then tubular secretion. So let's go through these. It's going to seem like a lot, and it is, but just know at the end, it's put together for you in this nice chart. So this is kind of what I would study, but we'll go through it here together. So the first, well, let's write down our 3 stages. Glomerular filtration, tubular reabsorption, and tubular secretion. And something to note is that only 20% of the plasma is filtered with each pass, so your blood is continuously filtered. So glomerular filtration, this is filtering of blood at the glomerular capillaries. So here's a zoomed in picture of our glomerulus here. So blood enters at the afferent, the arriving arteriole, and at this point, nutrients, waste, salt, and water are filtered and into the glomerular capsule. Here you can see we've got water, urea, glucose, amino acids, uric acids, salt. And the formed elements and plasma proteins that we talked about in blood will stay in the blood. So you might be looking at this here and thinking, why would we want to get nutrients out of the blood? Well, don't worry, they'll come back, you'll see. So the filtrate then enters the glomerular capsule. And then the blood is going to exit via the efferent arteriole. Which becomes the peritubular capillary network. Sorry about my squeaky pen. So here's a summary of glomerular filtration up here. Water, salts, nutrient molecules, and waste molecules move from the glomerulus to the inside of the glomerular capsule, and these small molecules are called the glomerular filtrate. Okay, now let's look at tubular reabsorption. This is reclaiming some of the filtrate back into the blood because there are some things we want back. So filtrate removes from the glomerular capsule to the proximal, remember that closest in proximity, convoluted tubule, and then to the distal convoluted tubule. And I feel like my notes are missing something here. Most water, all glucose, other nutrients, and salts. And that's all my notes say, but I think it's supposed to say are reabsorbed. So a tubular reabsorption, I know this is hard to see. Nutrient and salt molecules are actively reabsorbed from the convoluted tubules into the peritubular capillary network, and water flows passively. With tubular secretion, this is secreting unfiltered molecules and ions into the filtrate. So ions and molecules secreted from the peritubular capillary blood into both proximal and distal convoluted tubules. And so at this area of the urine formation, this is where we maintain blood concentrations of ions. And concentrations of hydrogen ion versus hydroxide ion. So quick review in your head. What is that going to regulate in your body? It's going to regulate the pH. So in tubular secretion, summarized over here, certain ions and molecules like hydrogen ions and penicillin, that's random, are actively secreted from the peritubular capillary network into the convoluted tubules. So just a side note here, with diabetes, glucose in the blood is so high that it can't all be reabsorbed. And so this results in glucose in the urine. And you may have heard that back in the days, they would see, when they were diagnosing people with diabetes, they would see if ants were attracted to their urine. Maybe someone just told me this and it's a lie. I better look into this. Or they would actually taste the urine to see if it tasted sweet, because if it did, it had glucose in it because your kidneys aren't able to reabsorb all of it. And then remember, water follows solute. So if you have a lot of this glucose solute in your urine, a lot of the water is going to follow into the urine, and that's why diabetics urinate a lot and become dehydrated. Those are some of the symptoms. So kind of interesting. All right, and then here is a summary of all of that. So this is what I would study, and then kind of look at the picture at the diagram as you're studying that, so you can remember where these are happening, a description of what's happening and what is moving. All right, and that's it for urinary system. We'll see you next time for reproductive system.